Innovations Fair 2022 Overview of the Wheelchair Inventory of Orientation and Mobility Skills, presented by Ron Lader, Resource Specialist and Orientation and Mobility Instructor.
My name is Ron Lader. I'm an Orientation and Mobility Specialist at the Alamogordo campus of New Mexico School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. Been here since 1999. About 12 years ago, developed the Orientation and Mobility Inventory, which is a tool that approximately 28% of O&Ms in the United States, according to a study done by one of the Carolina universities, are using in order to quantify the overall skill development of their students and track it over time. I was approached by an O&M in Halifax named Joe McDonald, and he had questions about it, and they started using the inventory up in their neck of the woods. And then he had a bunch of students who were in wheelchairs, so he was in contact with Scott Crawford, who's kind of known to be the orientation mobility wheelchair guru down in Louisiana. And Joe was kind of the conduit to get me and Scott together and create the orientation mobility inventory, the wheelchair inventory, which basically looked at the skills in the inventory and then looked at what skills needed to be changed, dropped, what skills needed to be added to make it very meaningful for students who are using a wheelchair, a power wheelchair, or a scooter. And using Scott's expertise, we were able to really look at all those skills. And then once it was developed, we were able to put it on our website, the School for the Blind website. And I believe it's also going to be on the one in Louisiana and possibly the one up there in Canada as well, just as a free resource to orientation mobility specialists. I do generally, I tend to talk really fast. And so we have the video that is going to be playing.
Okay, I am trying to do a 5-minute overview of something that generally takes quite a bit longer, and I'm trying to resist my natural impulse to speak very quickly. This is a quick overview of the Orientation and Mobility Wheelchair Inventory. We call it the WINventory, Wheelchair Inventory. The Orientation Mobility Inventory is a compendium of skills needed in order to travel safely and efficiently. For example, in the street crossings domain, the regular inventory, the standard inventory, I should say, or the wheelchair inventory, there's a section on plus intersections, crossing counterclockwise and clockwise at the appropriate times at plus intersections that have an all-way stop, have one street stop where the other goes through, or has a traffic light, for example. The WINventory came about when Joe McDonald, who is up in Canada, was using the inventory with many of his students, but didn't have a tool that kind of covered all of the ground that the inventory covered with the students that he had who were using wheelchairs, either power or manual or even scooters. Scott Crawford is the field's big dog when it comes to all things wheelchairs. And so Joe's idea was to bring Scott's knowledge to the inventory and then create a tool that would help guide orientation mobility specialists working with visually impaired students who are also wheelchair users, and make sure that all of the skills were being covered. As a longtime orientation mobility specialist, I can tell you that there are many things that with the WINventory I am much more aware of than I would be without it. For example, to come here to the indoors domain, there's just an area called doors. And the doors starts out with identify the presence of a door. Okay, well that's something that you would do with a student in a wheelchair without a wheelchair. But then there are things that really go into detail, such as negotiate open doors straight in, negotiate open doors turning in left, turning in right, backing in straight, backing in with a turn, using doors with knobs, using doors with levers, latches, panic bars, and so there's so many different considerations with a person who's using a wheelchair who also has a visual impairment that most orientation mobility specialists really aren't going to think about all those things. And so the wheelchair inventory, the WINventory, is a very good guide for people who are in the field, who are working with students with visual impairments, who are also using a wheelchair, whether it be power or manual or one of the scooters. And so what the user does is just rate all of these skills. And we have a student here that I'm just calling Billy. It's not his real name, but he is an actual real student. And, you know, we can kind of see where his scores are. Billy is 6 years old, and the total score right now is 25.8%. It's not a grade. That's one of the most important things I stress with parents. It's not a grade. It's the percentage of skills that Billy, when we finished this last quarter in December, the percentage of the skills that Billy had that would be expected of an adult. And so since Billy's 6 years old, you know, we have a long way to go in terms of time in order to make sure we're imparting all of the skills for Billy, not his real name again, so that he can go about his life and go wherever he wants to without mobility being something that holds him back. We don't want students to be afraid, you know, to go out and get a bus and go to the store, go to the work, go to wherever. We don't want them to just stay home. Our goal is to make sure that they are able to go out and live their lives. Now, Billy is obviously not very far along at this point. Now, a lot of that comes to we haven't had a chance to work with Billy on a lot of these skills. We've been working with Billy on more general orientation and mobility skills, but the wheelchair-specific skills, you know, this tool is going to allow us to hone in on and make sure that we're equipping him with all of the tools he needs in order to get where he wants to in life. Now, I'm running out of time. There's only about 30 seconds left in my 5-minute-ish time frame. And so I will just very quickly talk about a feature that the tool has. So the user rates each of the skills, you know, goes into concepts, rates each of the skills, and right now we have some very low scores, in large part because we haven't had a chance to work on some of these skills yet. You know, now some skills, you know, identifying body parts relevant to O&M, he's doing very well. 4 is a student who is able to demonstrate the skill most of the time without any kind of a prompting. And there's a rating scale on every page. 0 doesn't count against the student, but 1, the student hasn't been exposed. 2, they only do it with direct support. A 5 is the student owns the skill. They can do it in multiple places and all that kind of stuff. So the user rates all of the skills, and then all of the data is compiled here on the front page. We can then share this with the parent, who can then say, well, wait, why is sidewalk travel 24%? It's really important for me that he get to go around the neighborhood and things like that, and I want that to, you know, be a point of emphasis. So the parent can have a lot more input than they can with your standard goal for orientation mobility, which may be something like, you know, Billy's going to go on a route in the school that involves 2 turns, or, you know, use 1 landmark during a route or something like that. That doesn't give that more global perspective. So the Winventory does give the parent that global perspective and does enable them to ask more questions. For the user, for the orientation mobility specialist, there's a whole report writing feature, and you know, it does present levels and all that kind of stuff, which helps with the paperwork burden that the orientation mobility specialist has, which translates into more time with Billy, less time in the office doing paperwork, more time with Billy working on skills to get Billy as close to 100% as we can get Billy. So that is a very quick overview of the orientation and mobility inventory.
I think I said inventory at the end. I meant Winventory, since it's the wheelchair inventory. But it is free. It's on the website, and that's true also for the inventory, the birth to 6 inventory, which was something that our birth to 3 program put together. And then the inventory for students with multiple impairments. And all of those are free, along with the little supporting videos as to how to and documents and things like that.
Ron, do you mind sharing a link to where all the inventories are on the website?
I can pull that up real quick. It is, if you go to the NMS BVI website, there is a resources tab, but I will put the link here in the chat as well. But it is pretty easy to find. You can also just go to Google or DuckDuckGo and type in orientation mobility inventory, and it'll pop up.
On the internet, go to nmsbvi.org, click on Resources, scroll down, and click on O&M Inventory. Innovations Fair 2022 Overview of the Wheelchair Inventory of Orientation and Mobility Skills. For more information, contact Ron Later, Resource Specialist and Orientation and Mobility Instructor. NMSBVI email rlater, RLATER @nmsbvi.k12.nm.us.